Hello, my friend. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. If you choose to subscribe to the channel, know that it would genuinely mean a lot. Let's dive in. My name is Robert, and the moment I gave up on saving my marriage took place over dinner. One sentence from my wife was enough to sever the final thread I had been clinging to. We were seated at a small, quiet restaurant when she met my gaze and said, "I'm in love with someone else." No warning, no remorse. Something inside me went still. I didn't respond. I didn't ask questions. I didn't press for reasons. I just knew it was over. I signaled for the check, paid without another word, stood up, and walked away. I left her sitting there alone, surprised by the finality of it all. That moment marked the beginning of a complete shift in my life. When I think back on our relationship, what stands out is how quietly it unraveled. There was no explosive ending, just a gradual decay. Like a wall fading from years of sunlight and peeling paint, it came apart slowly, almost invisibly. Long before we acknowledged it, our marriage had ceased to function as one. We lived under the same roof, shared meals, even went to bed side by side, but the emotional bond had vanished. What we had left was a partnership in name only, cohabitants instead of companions. On many days, we spoke only to coordinate daily logistics, bills, appointments, groceries. Strangely, we never argued. But the absence of conflict didn't mean harmony, it meant disconnection. Neither of us had the energy to disagree, let alone repair, and that indifference, quiet and persistent, was the most heartbreaking of all. Our silence wasn't peaceful. It was stifling. It reminded us every day of what used to exist between us, now replaced by distance. I can still recall when it hit me that we hadn't shared a touch or any intimacy in months. The absence no longer felt strange. It had become routine, and that was the hardest part to accept, the shift from once being in love to barely existing together. I used to feel like the person she had chosen, the one she leaned on. Remembering that only deepened the emptiness. And the truth is, neither of us made any real effort to recover what was lost, so when she finally admitted to loving someone else, it wasn't a new betrayal. It was the confirmation of something long dead. That dinner didn't destroy our marriage. It simply ended the illusion that it was still intact. When I first met Susan, I was in my late 20s with a steady job at a well-known agrochemical company and a clear sense of purpose. She was different, driven, imaginative, full of vision. From the start, she spoke with clarity about wanting to build a wellness brand. Her dreams weren't vague ambitions, they were structured plans. She had mapped out her product ideas, the brand identity, and the kind of experience she wanted her customers to have. She told me how she had struggled to get the business off the ground, submitting grant proposals, pitching to investors, trying different models. But nothing had quite taken hold. What stood in her way was money. And it was clear that the weight of that frustration stayed with her. Now, I've always been conservative with my finances. I had built up my savings through discipline and caution. But one night, listening to her speak so passionately about her unfulfilled dream, I did something unexpected. I gave her $50,000 from my own account to help launch her venture. It wasn't just about the idea. I believed in her. I wanted to be part of her success. I still remember the way she looked at me that night, genuinely moved. She said no one had ever believed in her like that, not even her closest friends or family. She told me I had changed everything. In that moment, I felt seen, not just appreciated, but respected. That feeling stayed with me. She handled everything professionally. The business was properly registered, legally sound, and well organized. On paper, it might have looked like a typical investment, but for me, it was far more personal. That money wasn't just capital. It was a promise, a declaration of belief in our shared future. With that support, things began to take shape quickly. Each week brought new milestones. Watching her transform those late-night ideas into a living, breathing business was exhilarating. I was proud to stand beside her. I offered my help without hesitation, because there's a unique joy in seeing someone you love grow into who they're meant to be. For a while, it felt like I was a part of something meaningful. After her business started gaining momentum, we got married. I felt confident we had the right ingredients for a strong future, two driven individuals moving in the same direction. I saw us evolving together, supporting one another, maybe even starting a family someday. At first, everything aligned. We lifted each other up. She'd often tell me I was her calm anchor. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Even when her workload intensified, I stayed understanding. I told myself this was what success looked like. Sleepless nights, stress, growing pains. I believed it would pass. But that phase didn't pass. It became the norm. Her late nights turned into standard routine. I'd come home to silence, to empty rooms. When she finally walked in, she'd offer a tired smile and say, "It was chaos today." At first, I sympathized, but gradually, I began to notice the shift. Her focus was everywhere, except on me. Her style became more refined, her wardrobe filled with high-end labels. Her social circle changed, too. The friends we used to see disappeared, replaced by unfamiliar names, clients, colleagues, strangers to me. Still, I stayed quiet. I adapted, took on more duties at home, focused on my own work, told myself to be patient while she pursued her passion. But by our 4th year of marriage, the distance between us was undeniable. We weren't fighting, but we weren't connected. We had become polite strangers inhabiting the same space. I kept hoping things would turn around, that eventually we'd reconnect. But in my heart, I knew better. This wasn't a temporary detour. This was the path we were on. And even though I could feel it falling apart, I couldn't bring myself to step away. I'd poured too much into it, emotionally, financially, personally. And sometimes, when you've spent years trying to hold something together, you start believing it's still intact, even when it's clearly broken. Most evenings, I'd linger at the office or take a longer route home. But one day, I decided to come back early. I pulled into the driveway quietly and entered through the side door. That's when I heard her voice on the back patio. It was Susan, on the phone. Her tone caught me immediately. Playful, flirtatious, carefree. I paused just out of sight, listening. It didn't take long to realize this wasn't a work call, and it wasn't innocent. I stepped out and called her name. She jumped, startled. Her eyes darted to the phone, then to me. Without a word, she hung up. I asked in a level voice, "Who were you talking to?" She said nothing. I didn't say a word, just stood there, letting the moment wash over me. The silence between us spoke louder than anything she could have explained away. She knew exactly what I had seen. I understood exactly what I'd heard. And no matter how much she tried to brush it off like I was overreacting, the guilt on her face said everything. After that night, something in our world fractured. The house no longer felt like ours. We moved around each other like strangers sharing rented space. I began leaving before daylight and coming home long after dark. She did the same. We barely spoke, and when we did, the words felt forced, cold, empty. Still, my thoughts kept circling back to that phone call. I couldn't shake the idea that Susan, my wife, was involved with someone else, emotionally, or maybe even physically. But I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. As much as it hurt, I wasn't willing to throw everything away because of one moment. A part of me clung to the idea that we could still fix this. Maybe she was struggling with something she hadn't shared. 2 months passed, and the silence between us only grew heavier. Eventually, I told her we needed to go out, just the two of us. I said we should talk, try to reconnect somehow. She hesitated briefly before agreeing. That small pause before her yes gave me a sliver of hope. I picked a restaurant we used to love, thinking that being somewhere familiar might spark something, remind us of who we used to be before everything cracked. The drive was filled with tension. She hardly spoke, her eyes fixed on her phone, smiling softly at whatever she was reading. I noticed it, and noticed how those smiles hadn't been directed at me in weeks. I didn't say anything. I focused on driving, determined not to ruin the evening before it had a chance to begin. When we got to the restaurant and sat down, it became obvious. Her mind wasn't with me. She left her phone on the table, constantly typing messages. Whoever was on the other end clearly had her full attention. I tried to start a normal conversation, asked how her day had gone, what was happening at work, anything to break the silence. She answered, but her responses were short, emotionless. It felt like I was talking to someone just playing along out of obligation. Eventually, I gave up trying. I sat there watching her interact with that screen like I wasn't even present. That was the moment I decided I was done pretending. I leaned forward and told her plainly, I didn't come out just to sit quietly and stare at cold food. I told her we needed to talk, truly talk, about what was going on between us. I admitted that I felt the distance growing, that I missed her, missed the connection we used to have. I told her I still wanted to try, if there was anything left worth saving. I laid everything bare, hoping we could rebuild even the faintest trace of what we once were. But I wasn't prepared for what she said next. She leaned in, lowered her voice, and told me, without much ceremony, that she'd fallen in love with someone else. I froze. I didn't ask for names, didn't ask how long it had been going on, didn't care about the details. I just took a slow drink of water, swallowed the ache building in my chest, and said, "Good to know." That was all I could manage, not because I didn't have more to say, but because nothing else seemed to matter. Her choice had already been made. That dinner wasn't the beginning of a new chapter. It was the closing sentence in a story that had been unraveling for far too long. I signaled for the check, paid the bill, and left without another word. I didn't look back. On the inside, I was burning. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing endlessly through my head. I was caught somewhere between numbness and raw pain. Sleep eventually came, but it didn't bring peace. By morning, I felt like I'd aged a decade overnight. Later that day, Susan packed up her belongings and walked out. I didn't ask where she was headed, I already knew. She had chosen her new life, and that was that. At least the questions were gone. She had drawn a clear boundary, and finally, I was ready to draw mine too. My head felt heavy, but my focus was sharper than it had been in months. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. We'd worked together before, property, contracts, but this time it was different. When I told him I needed a divorce attorney, he paused and asked, "Are you sure, Robert?" I told him I had never been more certain. But there was something else I needed him to handle. I told him I wanted back the $50,000 I had invested in Susan's business. I explained that while the money came from a place of love at the time, things had changed. Now it was a business matter, and I wanted it treated like one. If the relationship was over, so were the financial ties. My lawyer didn't hesitate. He brought in a divorce expert and referred the financial side to one of his firm's litigation attorneys. I told them to move quickly, and they did. Calls were made, papers drafted, and I signed everything without delay. By the end of the week, Susan had divorce documents in her hands, along with a formal demand for repayment of the $50,000. Then, unexpectedly, I received a phone call. The man on the line introduced himself, and I knew right away who he was, the one Susan had left me for. He got straight to the point. He said he was now involved in her business and begged me not to pull the funding. He claimed it would ruin everything and asked for more time. I didn't let him finish. I cut him off and told him to never call me again. I warned him that if he did, he'd see a side of me he wasn't prepared for. He tried reasoning with me, but I hung up and blocked the number. That was the only conversation we ever had. The legal battle wasn't easy. The system tends to lean in favor of the one who leaves first, and I had seen it happen to others. Now I was living it. But two things worked in my favor. We had no children, and she had voluntarily moved out before anything was filed. That limited her ability to claim shared assets or push for more than she deserved. I kept my communications formal, documented everything, and stayed focused. In the end, I got what I asked for, including the return of my $50,000, plus interest. Letting her walk away with that money would have been like rewarding betrayal. I wasn't going to let that happen. Today, I feel no anger towards Susan, but I also don't feel love. The woman I once loved disappeared long ago. What remained wasn't someone worthy of my loyalty or my protection. So I walked away, head high, dignity intact, and made sure the door behind me stayed firmly closed. That part of my life is finished. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If it spoke to you in any way, feel free to check out the rest of the content on this channel. Take care, and until next time.